Hello, hello, hello. Day 2. Here we are, ready to roll. I'm just putting this up here. I'm going to let it ride till we get started here.
There is no schedule at Law Talk Nation. You can only pay, get a notification. If you're lucky, it's a spicy fornication. It's another day on Law Talk with Mike. We got preacher on the dial, planning always make your chest smile. The pros say can't ever share a file. Defendants are always in denial. He was not driving, he's traveling. His reasons and facts are unraveling, unraveling. It's another day on Law Talk with Mike. Courtroom is always popping off. You have a failure appear and you scoff. Judge Simpson is never going soft. Webster is always showing heart. We are heading into that solstice summer. Did you miss the line? That's a bummer. The soft six never get smarter than dumber. He's not the man, he doesn't need a number. He was not driving, he's traveling. His reasons and facts are unraveling. It's another day of Law Talk with Mike. Courtroom is always popping off. You have a failure to appear and you scoff. Judge Simpson is never going soft. Webster is always showing hard. We are heading into. There is no schedule at Law Talk Nation. You can only pay, get a notification. If you're lucky, it's a spicy fornication. It's another day on Law Talk with Mike. We got preacher. Number one, wrong. Know what I'm saying? Number one, wrong. Know what I'm saying? We are the Law Talk with Mike crew. Number one, wrong. Know what I'm saying? 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 Judge Simpson will tell you that being a no. We just have one question, are you a hoe? Mr. Shots, oh Mr. Shots, so where did you go? We have questions like on the weekends, do you work selling burritos? The Law Talk with my crew, we're here to laugh at you. We see you in court acting all tough. You solve issues and life must be so rough. Without getting into further details, there were drugs involved. I thought I was smoking crack, but it was just glue that dissolved. Oh man, I gotta get it together because wow, that was messed up. And your honor, I have IBS and I'm bleeding inside and it's really been rough. The Law Talk with my crew, we're here to laugh at you. We see you in court acting all tough. You solve issues and life must be so rough. And now Kinky Kelly is shacked up in bed with the fruit bowl. Then the cat jumped on his wiener and started causing trouble. Love exciting and new. We are and always will be the Law Talk with my crew. The Law Talk with my crew. We see you in court acting all tough. You solve issues and life must be so rough. Without getting into further details, there were drugs involved. I thought I was smoking crack, but it was just glue that dissolved. Oh man, I gotta get it together because wow, that was messed up. And your honor, I have BS, and I'm bleeding inside, and it's really been rough. The law talk with my crew, here to laugh at you. We see you in court acting all tough. Judge Simpson will tell you to be in the know. We just have one question, are you a hoe?
Trial.
This is crazy.
Ma'am, are you a whore? You're not a whore? Not a whore? You're not a whore?
I never want to hear it again. Sweet Jesus.
You're not a whore? Not a whore? You're not a whore?
I never want to hear it again.
It gets worse.
There were drugs involved that were given to me that ended up being glue. Like, I smoked some glue and stuff. I thought I was smoking crack.
Let's go.
You didn't say the cat jumped on his wiener, did you? Sit down and shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Cat jumped on his wiener. Cat jumped on his wiener. Shut up. Cat jumped on his wiener. Cat jumped on his wiener. Shut up. Cat jumped on his wiener. Cat jumped on his wiener. Shut up. Cat jumped on his wiener. Cat jumped on his wiener. Shut up.
Can you just let this go for once? For once? Once?
Okay, back to
Behavior in this case is disgusting.
I never want to hear it again.
Are you a whore?
Mr. Sharts.
Not a whore?
Mr. Sharts. Mr. Sharts. Mr. Sharts.
You're not a whore? You're not a whore?
I never want to hear it again.
You're not a whore? You're not a whore?
I never want to hear it again.
Now, if anybody thinks this is okay, I am in the wrong.
You didn't say the cat jumped on his wiener, did you?
I'm not talking to you to have a conversation.
Say a word. Oh, and go ahead and put yourself on mute now.
I'd have to feel like I should be elected emperor of the world before I could be that arrogant, not show up for a sentencing. Like really, like top two. Only me and one other person get to run for emperor of the world.
If you didn't know, y'all stink. Okay, that's just my opinion.
Anxiety leads to constipation.
Sofa?
It wasn't me.
That really, really sucks. I mean, really.
Can you please state your name for the record, ma'am?
He's not.
Okay, thank you.
Swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury.
I suppose.
Until this fuckery is figured out.
Do this today, Your Honor. My health is in jeopardy right now.
What's up?
I have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and what's been going on?
Very stressful.
I'm bleeding inside, ma'am.
Because your petitions, whoever has drafted it, they don't know how to draft the petition properly. Which is number one, wrong.
You love it. I know you love it.
Hell no.
I would like you to understand that I know what false identities are, and sometimes famous people need them. Marshall Bruce Mathers, Eminem, at one point studied law and passed the bar exam to become a lawyer. If he still is a lawyer, I want you to get a hold of him for me so that I can communicate with him.
Why are you unnecessarily wasting the judicial time of this court?
Yeah, without getting into further detail, there were drugs involved that people were giving to me that ended up being glue. Like, I smoked some glue and stuff. I thought I was smoking crack, and
do you have a job when you're not in custody?
Yes, I do have a job.
Where do you work?
Yeah.
Where do you work?
Oh, I work, I sell burritos sometimes.
Annie is asking very nicely for you to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification. And if you ignore Annie, you do realize that that is considered capital felony treason.
Received international attention.
International attention.
I got a recap for you. Woman zips her boyfriend into a suitcase and videotapes it while he begs to be let out. Then he dies. Here's the trial. Oh.
You jacking me around and railroading me through the trial.
exciting and new.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm assuming that's a yes. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Oh, Lord.
Flip the camera.
Cut that camera, please. This thing, because I don't know what's about to happen there.
I don't know what's going on. I just went with the published time. My guess is a juror is late. That's wild speculation.
No cutting up, please. Then the imposition is right. No cutting up, please.
Ma'am, are you a whore? You're not a whore? Not a whore? You're not a whore? I never want to hear it again. Sweet Jesus. You're not a whore? Not a whore? You're not a whore? I never want to hear it again.
It gets worse.
There were drugs involved that were given to me that ended up being glue. Like I smoked some glue and stuff. I thought I was smoking crack.
Let's go.
You didn't say the cat jumped on his wiener, did you? Sit down and shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Cat jumped on his wiener. Cat jumped on his wiener. Shut up. Cat jumped on his wiener. Cat jumped on his wiener. Shut up. Cat jumped on his wiener. Cat jumped on his wiener. Shut up. Cat jumped on his wiener. Cat jumped on his wiener. Shut up.
Can you just let this go for once? For once? Once?
Okay, that dude knows.
I never want to hear it again. You a whore?
Mr. Sharts,
Not a whore?
Mr. Sharts, Mr. Sharts, Mr. Sharts.
Everybody fucking dance.
You're not a whore? You're not a whore? I never want to hear it again. You're not a whore? You're not a whore? I never want to hear it again.
Now, if anybody thinks this is okay, I am in the wrong group.
There was, and I hate, God, I hate this. Hey, someone puts a dick pussy, dick pussy, dick pussy, dick pussy, going back and forth between texts with one another. But I never want to hear it again.
Away, but a short time later you came back. Is that true?
Yeah, I was on my way to Planet Fitness.
Oh man, I gotta get together. Oh, I'm just getting railroaded here.
Judge Simpson will tell you that being a no, need yourself one question, are you a hoe? Mrs. Short, so Mrs. Short, so where did you go? We have questions like on the weekends, do you work selling burritos? The law talk with my crew, we here to laugh at you. We see you in court acting all tough. Your soul says citizen life must be so rough. Without getting into further details, there were drugs involved. I thought I was smoking crack, but it was just glue that dissolved. Oh man, I gotta get it together because wow, that was messed up. And your honor, I have IBS and I'm bleeding inside and it's really been rough. The law talk with my crew, here to laugh at you. We see you in court acting all tough. Your soul says citizen life must be so.
I don't know what to tell you, people.
And now Kinky Kelly is shacked up in bed with the frugal.
Do we have any people in the courtroom?
Love exciting and new. We are and always will be. The law talk with my crew.
I can't tell you guys where it is, but it is shocking, the reach of Law Talk with Mike, and I'm not kidding. I can't tell you the number of courtrooms that we have people in. I can't out those people, but it's everywhere.
The law talk with my crew, here to laugh at you. We see you in court acting all tough. Judge Simpson will tell you that being a no, need yourself one question, are you a hoe?
Indeed we have. Without trying, by the way. I think we can all agree that Mindy's got a dirty mind. We put a call in Beaver Plumbing.
Yeah, stop talking about your case, please.
They're live? Where? Looks like we got a little delay.
Judge, can the parties approach the bench?
As soon as Madam Clerk calls it, we can do that.
Case number 2020-2603, the state of Florida versus Sarah Boone. Parties announced your names for the record, beginning with the state.
Dave Castro on behalf of the state. William J. for the state.
Defense.
James Owens for Sarah Boone.
Tell me how you sing for Sarah Boone. Kevin Becker would have to.
Ms. Boone, raise your right hand and be sworn. Please. I do.
Good morning, ma'am. Can you state your full name and date of birth for the record for me?
Sarah Boone, 10-10-7-7.
Ms. Boone is seated at counsel's table wearing a black jacket and a white multicolored shirt. Looks like some splotching on it. She is in custody. However, she is not wearing any restraints. So we will be standing when our jury panel enters and exits. The parties may approach.
It's on, people. This is happening. It's time for dramatic humor.
State, anything we need to address before we bring in our panel this morning?
Not from the state.
Defense.
No, sir.
All right. Ms. Boone, just a couple of questions before we bring in our panel this morning. Are you still satisfied with your lawyer's representation of you in this matter?
Very much so.
And are you still on board with the strategy that they are utilizing in your defense?
Yes.
All right, very good. Let's go ahead and stand and bring in our panel.
Jury entering.
Brandon, I'm sorry for being awesome. I really am. Okay, I'm not.
State, do you recognize our jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense, do you recognize our jury? Yes. All right, everyone can be seated. Members of the jury, good morning. Welcome back to 12 Alpha of the Orange County Courthouse. I hope that you all had a restful weekend and enjoyed your time with your loved ones, your friends, and your family. Just if you could, I gave you a long instruction on Friday before we broke. If you could please confirm that you complied with the court's instructions by raising your hand at this time. Record reflect that all members of our panel have raised their hands. Now, members of the jury, I know the line to get in this morning was quite long. So the lawyers have reminded me that on the right side of the entrance of the courthouse is a jury-only line. So if you can make your way all the way to the far right side of the entrance, there's a jury-only line. Yes, sir. Juror number 2 in the back. Huh? It was still quite long? Okay, thank you. Just wanted to bring that to your attention if you did not know. Obviously, if you're stuck, we're waiting on you. So don't feel anxiety or anything if you're stuck in that line. We can't start till you all get here. And I appreciate, again, your sacrifice and your attentiveness in this process. With that, State, you can call your next witness.
State will call Dr. Sarah Zadovich.
You swear or affirm that the testimony you should give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, thank you.
Good morning, doctor. Could you please state and spell your name for the record for us?
Sarah Zadovich, SARAZYDOWICZ.
Thank you. You may inquire.
Good morning, ma'am.
Morning.
Can you tell us what do you do for a living?
I'm a forensic pathologist.
And who do you work for?
I work for Orange County. We cover Orange County and Osceola County.
And how long have you been a forensic pathologist?
I've been at this office for about 12 years and then 1 year in Tampa, so about 13 years.
And what type of educational background do you have to be a forensic pathologist?
So I have a bachelor's degree in kinesiology from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. I went to medical school in Kansas City, Missouri. After that, I went to Cleveland, Ohio to do a 1 year rotating clinical internship.
You lost me.
After
at
that, I
G-
went back to the University of Wisconsin. I did my residency in anatomic pathology and clinical pathology. I have 2 fellowships or subspecialty training. One is in cytopathology from Northwestern University in Chicago. And then I did my forensic pathology fellowship in Tampa.
Is continuing education something that you must maintain in order to hold your position?
Yes, I have to do continuing education for my board certifications, which is in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, and forensic pathology. And I also have to do separate continuing medical education to maintain my medical license for the state of Florida.
So tell us, what are your duties as a medical examiner?
So we're involved in what's called the medical legal investigation of deaths. And that just means that we investigate certain types of deaths. And there's a Florida statute or a Florida law that states which types of deaths that will be involved in investigating. And in general, they're deaths that are not natural. So accidents, suicides, homicides, or deaths that are natural but maybe unexpected. Those are the types of cases that we're involved in. And again, that Florida statute lays out exactly which types of cases that we'll be involved in. And the reason we're involved in that is our goal is to determine cause of death and manner of death in those individuals that we're investigating.
Could you tell us what an autopsy is, generally speaking?
So an autopsy is also called a postmortem or after death examination. And there are kind of 2 main parts to it. The first part is what's called an external examination, which is just as it sounds. So that's making observations about an individual. So hair color, eye color, height, any sort of unique markings like scars or tattoos. And at that time, we're also looking for any external signs of diseases or injuries. After that, we go to what's called the internal examination. So that means that we open the body cavities, we remove all of the organs and dissect all of the organs. And again, as we're doing that, we're looking for any signs of diseases or injuries that might help explain why that person died. And we can also add ancillary tests or other tests. So things like toxicology, microbiology. It's a little bit dependent on each case, but we have options for other testing as well.
Can you tell us what is the cause and manner of death? And is this something that you document?
Yes. So cause of death is either a disease or an injury that ultimately results in an individual's death. Right? So it's very individual and unique to that individual. Manner of death is a way to categorize or group similar types of deaths together. And for manner of death, there's only 5 choices. So there would be natural, accident, suicide, homicide, or undetermined. So those are the manners of death.
In your career, approximately how many autopsies have you performed?
Around 3,000.
And have you previously testified as an expert witness in court?
Yes.
How many times?
Between 75 to 80.
And in what areas have you testified as an expert witness?
Forensic pathology.
Turning our attention to this case, did you perform the autopsy?
Yes.
And what were your findings as to cause and manner of death?
So the cause of death, which I put on the death certificate, is positional asphyxia with environmental suffocation. And the manner of death I classified as homicide.
Now, when you perform your autopsy, what information do you have at the time that you begin that examination?
It's incredibly variable. I can have a lot of background information. Sometimes I have none. It just depends on the particular case.
In this case, what information were you provided at the time?
So the information that I had was that the decedent was with his girlfriend, and at some point in time in the night, he got into a suitcase, which was then zippered shut. At another point at time, I believe she went to bed, and then the next morning discovered that he was still in the suitcase. And I think that was in about an 11-hour time frame from the information that I had.
You mentioned asphyxia. Can you explain for us what asphyxia is?
Sure. So asphyxia is a very general term. It would be kind of like saying, I drive a car, right? That's very generic. And we know that there are many different types of cars out there, right? So asphyxia simply means lack of oxygen or inadequate oxygen for an individual. And there are different categories of asphyxia. So you can have suffocation, which just means that there's obstruction of the airways. So that could be smothering, that could be somebody choking on a piece of food, or maybe just being in an environment where there's not enough oxygen in the air to sustain that individual. There's a category called strangulation. That would be compression of the neck, either blood vessels or airways. There's another category called mechanical asphyxia. That can be when the body is in an unusual or abnormal position where the actual mechanics of breathing can't occur. So that can be the position of the body, or it can be like, let's say if a heavy object fell on somebody and you simply can't breathe because of the weight of that object. That would be a mechanical asphyxia. And then there's drowning. That's a different type of asphyxia. And there are a couple of other categories as well that are much less common.
Is there a most common type of asphyxia?
The most common would be ligature compression of the neck. So that would be like an event, a hanging. That would be the most common that we would see.
You also mentioned environmental suffocation. Could you tell us a little bit more what that means in more layman's terms?
So that just means that there's not enough oxygen in the environment that the person is in. You could think of somebody who's in an enclosed space where there's a fixed amount of oxygen. So as that oxygen is, as that person is breathing, they're using up all the oxygen. And once it's gone, there's no oxygen left. Or you could think of maybe people who are, climbing Mount Everest. There's not as much oxygen up there, and that's why they have oxygen tanks. So it just means that the amount of oxygen available in the air around that person is not enough to sustain them.
In this case, what can you tell us about how long George Torres was in that suitcase?
There's not a really good way for me to give you a time frame as to how long he was in that suitcase. Again, because there was both the component of positional asphyxia, being in an unusual position for a period of time, and then also the environmental suffocation component, because within that suitcase, certainly there's going to be oxygen, but it's not going to be the same as if you were sitting in a room like this. And because there are those multiple components happening at the same time, there's not a really good way to estimate or say with scientific certainty, oh, he was in for X amount of time. There's really not a good way to do that.
How about, is there any good way to approximate or determine the time that George Torres died?
There's not a good way to do that either, again, because there are so many different components at play at the time of his death. Sitting in a normal room like this, the percentage of oxygen that's available is about 20 to 21%. If that were to drop to 10 to 15%, the person can be impaired with judgment, they can be impaired with activity. Once that percentage drops between 8 to 10%, most people will lose consciousness. And at a percentage of 8% oxygen or less, that's when we would expect the death to occur. And so again, there's not a really good way to measure the amount of oxygen that would have been available to him in that suitcase, in addition to the fact that he was in an unusual position.
What position were you able to determine he was in that suitcase?
I wasn't able to see what position he was in. By the time that our medical legal death investigators were at the scene, he was already removed from the suitcase. Based on some of the findings, I favor that he was most likely in like a fetal type position. So knees flexed, arms flexed, and the head most likely flexed forward. But again, that's from my findings. I didn't see what position he was in.
What side of his body would he be resting on in this fetal position?
That's that most likely his left side. However, I do say the caveat that some of the findings are dependent on time, meaning that if that suitcase had been moved or flipped over, that could be different than what I'm seeing at the time of my examination.
Tell us, what is skin slippage?
So after death, the body goes through a series of progressive changes. And one of those changes is skin slippage. And what that does is it tells me that that person is a little bit further away from the actual time of death. So it's not something that's going to occur immediately after death for most people. It's something that would occur a little bit later on in that process of changes that happens after death.
And tell us, what is rigor mortis?
So rigor mortis is also called the post-mortem stiffening of muscles. And again, that's one of the changes that occurs after death. Most of the times that will occur before we see skin slippage. But these changes are very variable from individual to individual. And it also depends a lot the environment the person is in. So for example, those changes that we're going to see happen more quickly in a warm environment. Somebody who maybe is engaged in a physical or violent struggle, those changes are going to occur more rapidly. And then it also depends on the person themselves, their relative size, their relative health. Those things can all impact the changes that we see after death.
How does skin slippage and rigor mortis inform your findings about how long George Torres was likely in that suitcase?
So again, the time frame that I had was about 11 hours, just from the last time that he was known to be in the suitcase versus the time that he was found. So I'm basing it off of that. So about an 11-hour time period. When I did my examination, the rigor mortis was already dissipating or leaving. Also, there was some skin slippage. And so if he had not been in the suitcase, if he had been out of the suitcase, I would not expect that advanced amount of change. It's compatible with him being in that suitcase for a longer period of time. It would have been warmer. And also if he had been, struggling to get himself out, engaging that physical activity, those are things that are going to accelerate or speed up that process. So my findings at the time of the examination are compatible with that 11-hour time period or, somewhere around there.
Additionally, did you note any injuries to the body of George Torres?
Yes.
These injuries that you noted to the body of George Torres, did you document them on what's called a body chart?
Yes, the diagram on a body chart, and we also take pictures as I'm going through my examination.
Your Honor, may approach the witness who has been previously marked for identification and shown to defense as states are.
You may.
Ma'am, I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as states are. You recognize this document?
Yes.
And can you tell us, what is this document?
That's a copy of my body diagram.
Sorry,
It's a copy of my body diagram.
And does this fairly and accurately represent the diagram that you created in this case for George Torres?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to move what's previously been marked for identification as states are into evidence. No objection.
What was pre-marked as states R will be received into evidence without objection as states 12.
Your Honor, request permission to publish.
Yes, sir.
So, ma'am, on this body chart, can you describe for us and point out what was the first blunt impact injury that you identified?
So there was some blunt impact injuries to his head. I don't think it's on this one, but there were some blunt impact injuries to his head right up here on the eye and on the mouth area.
And then, did you notate any injuries to his hand?
Yes, so there were some ecchymoses, or you can think of that as like a large kind of bruise on both hands.
What other blunt impact injuries did you identify?
So there was a series of ecchymoses on the left side of the back, right about here.
And any others?
There were some on the forearms as well.
And you use this body chart, you say, in addition to photographing the injuries that you document, correct?
Yes.
As part of your examination, and I believe it's on the body chart itself, do you document the height and weight of the person as well?
Yes.
And what was the height of Mr. Torres?
So, yeah, so technically for us, it's length. Height is the measurement that's taken while someone is standing. So his length was 62 inches and his weight was 103 pounds.
In regards to these blunt impact injuries, how is it that you come to the conclusion that these injuries were the result of blunt impacts?
So these are typical wounding patterns for blunt force trauma. And when I say blunt force trauma, that can mean something striking a part of the body, or on the other hand, it can be the body striking an object. And that causes injury to the skin, to the soft tissue, and sometimes the deeper tissues, depending on how severe or how strong that blunt force trauma is.
Are these injuries consistent with a person being struck with a baseball bat?
They could be, yes.
Are they consistent with a person being pushed down a flight of stairs?
They could be, yes.
Can you say whether or not these injuries occurred while George Torres was in the suitcase?
No.
Why is it that you cannot say that?
So all of these injuries seem to have occurred around the same time, meaning that they're relatively acute or new. They're not things that are healing or something that happened last week. So they all occurred around the same time. But you can't really look at a bruise or a contusion and say, oh, that happened 2 hours ago. There's not a good way to do that.
Are these injuries consistent with them occurring while he was inside the suitcase?
Yes, they could be.
As part of your examination, do you also check the toxicology of George Torres?
Yes.
And is that something that's pretty standard in any autopsy?
Yes.
And what were the toxicology results for George Torres?
So there was a blood alcohol level of 0.139 milligrams per deciliter, and there was also caffeine and nicotine detected as well.
That level of alcohol, is that over the legal limit in the state of Florida to drive?
Sure. So for driving under the influence, that's a 0.08. So that is higher than that.
What does that alcohol level at the time of your autopsy tell you about George Torres's level of impairment 11 hours earlier?
So I don't necessarily know that it was 11 hours earlier, but it was at the time of death, at or near the time of his death. That's what the blood alcohol level was. So at that level, everyone reacts a little bit differently to alcohol. And some of it has to do with whether or not somebody is accustomed to drinking alcohol or if they've never had alcohol. So you can develop tolerance. But at that level, there's going to be impairment of judgment. There can be impairment of motor skills. There can be slurring of words. something that's called disinhibition or lack of inhibition. And again, it's really variable from person to person, but those are the common things that you would see at that level.
Would that level of alcohol
All right,
impair the
I'm back.
ability to problem solve?
It can, yes.
I hope you guys behaved yourselves with the Arsenio while I was gone.
You also stated earlier that you document your autopsy findings also photographically, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I know what I'm doing, and so does opposing counsel. So it goes down pretty smoothly. Hey now. Oh, now I have to go back and read the comments and see what damage has been done.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness who's been marked for identification as States Q and been shown to defense?
You may.
Ma'am, I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as States Q. Did you take a look at this composite of photographs to yourself and then look up once you're finished?
That's what I'm afraid of. She would actually know them.
Ma'am, do you recognize these photographs?
Yes.
Are these photographs a portion of the photographs that you took in your autopsy of George Torres in this case?
Yes.
Do they fairly and accurately represent how he appeared and how his injuries appeared to you at the time you performed your autopsy?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to move what's previously been marked for identification as States Q into evidence.
Yeah, these kind of witnesses are
What was
rough.
pre-marked as States Q will be received into evidence without objection.
They're
The States
necessary, but never very interesting.
Your Honor, request permission to publish.
You may do so.
Ma'am, I'm showing you photo 1 from State's Composite. Tell us.
In fact, that's what I was doing in my hearing.
So this
Sitting-
is the identification photo that's basically just showing from about the level of the collarbones up.
I was setting an F3 schedule for a medical expert.
Yes.
Did you note any signs of injury in this photo?
So there's some ecchymoses around the left eye. This picture, it's a little bit hard to see, but I think there's another one coming up. There's also an area of ecchymoses up here on the left side of the forehead with also some swelling associated with that. The lips have some
Find something better than law to go into.
contusions and small lacerations. And then on the left shoulder here, you can see a little bit of some ecchymoses here, or again, ecchymoses are kind of like big bruises.
Turning to photo 2 from State's Composite. What are we looking at in this photograph?
So this is his right arm near the elbow. And right here, you can see this kind of darker area. So this looks similar to an abrasion, but it's actually it's what's called drying artifact. And again, this is one of the reasons that I think that he was in that suitcase for a little bit longer. Most likely that was a pressure point where part of that suitcase was resting on his elbow in that area. And then after death, that tissue dries out, and that's the discoloration that you're seeing there.
Turning to states 3 from the composite.
So here you can see a little bit better. I don't know if you can get a feeling for this, but this area is what we call edema or swelling. So this whole area is edema. It's a little bit discolored, so ecchymosis. And then again, really at the corner of the eye here, you can see that darker discoloration. And so those are injuries from blunt force trauma.
States 4 from the composite.
So this is the left shoulder and arm. So again, you can see this kind of red to purple area. So this is all ecchymosis, and then a couple of linear abrasions or scratches.
States 5 from the composite.
This is the same area, just a little bit closer up. So you can see this whole area of ecchymosis. It's a little bit variegated, differential in color, but again, that's all blunt force trauma.
And what part of the body is this we're looking at?
This is the left shoulder.
States 6 from the composite.
That's the same area, but in this picture, we have a scale or the ruler.
And why do we use scales and rulers?
That's just to give an idea of how big the area is or how large the injury is.
States 7 from the composite.
So this is the left forearm and hand, and you can see the area right here that's a little bit red to purple, and then also right here on the left hand, right here and here. Those are all areas of ecchymosis, again, blunt force trauma.
States 8 from the composite.
Again, the left arm. Just from a little bit of a different angle, so you can see, and a little bit with the elbow too here, but you can see all these areas, ecchymosis.
States 9 from the composite.
And now looking at the left hand, a little bit closer up, so you can kind of see a little bit better these areas of ecchymosis.
States 10 from the composite.
And again, the left hand just closer up.
States 11 from the composite.
So now we're looking at the back, and you can see that there are these linear abrasions in the mid-back.
Are those scratch marks? Or?
They could be scratch marks. They could also be blunt impact, more of just a straight-on blunt impact, especially being in that suitcase if there are objects in there.
What is the discoloration that we see around his shoulders and then some other spots on his back?
Sure. So you're talking about this area?
Yes.
So that's called livor mortis or lividity. And that's one of the changes that we see again after death. And basically what that is it's postmortem after death, settling of blood in the blood vessels. And so it's dependent on gravity and it's dependent on the person's position. So what I mean by that is we're seeing it on his back because after the time of death, at some point in time, he was more positioned on his back. And the areas that are lighter, that's because for a couple of reasons. It could be the position of the body, meaning that it's not in the gravity dependent position, or there could be something pressing on it. So
It's
either one
just
of those.
horrific.
Stage 12 on the composite.
So those are those linear abrasions just shown a little bit closer up.
Stage 13 from the composite.
And the same, but with a scale.
Stage 14 from the composite.
So now you're seeing the left side of his back and also the back of his left arm. And you can see these areas here of ecchymoses, and these are a lot darker than some of the others that we've seen. One of the things that I did is I looked underneath the skin in these areas because they're so much darker and so much more dense. So I wanted to see if there was injury of the deeper tissues. So these areas are associated with hemorrhage or bleeding into the skeletal muscle, so the deeper tissues. And so that's just indicating more force applied to that area.
And when you did your internal exam, did you examine this area and did that inform your findings?
Yes.
Stage 15 from the composite.
And that's showing those areas a little bit closer up. So you can see that they're much more dense. There's at least 3 distinct areas here. There could be more than 3 impacts, but there's at least 3 separate ones that can be seen.
Stage 16 from the composite.
This is just showing the upper back and the back of the neck. We've got a linear abrasion right here on the back of the neck, and these were the ones shown in the earlier pictures.
And stage 17 from the composite.
And this is just showing the same area of the back and the back of the arm, but just at a different angle.
So we've discussed and seen evidence of many different injuries. In total, how many blunt impact injuries did you identify?
I can't give you an exact number. Again, you can have multiple impacts in a very close area. So it can be hard to discern each one. They can overlay each other or they can be so close to each other. But at least, 5 to 6, most likely more than that.
And when you were going through your body chart as well, and I guess we also saw some of it photographically, as you also mentioned impact to the left side of the head.
Yes.
And I believe that was subgaleal.
Subgaleal. So kind of similar to what I was describing on the back. I looked at the underside of the scalp. And so in those areas on the left side of his forehead where there was the edema, when we reflect or we fold the scalp over, there was hemorrhage or bleeding that went through the entire scalp and was deposited on the skull. There was no associated skull fracture and there was no bleeding inside of the skull, but it was all in the scalp and deposited on the outer surface of the skull.
So under the skin, but not under the skull.
Correct.
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
Thank you. Any cross-examination?
Yes. Doctor, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is James Owens, and I'm one of the lawyers that represents Sarah Boone here today. And I've got 2 questions. Can we first talk about the toxicology?
Yes.
The alcohol. You said you've done approximately 3,000 autopsies. And of those autopsies, how many years would that have been over that period of time?
12 years.
Okay. So when you first got down here from Tampa, I think you were up in the Northeast, came down here to Tampa, that's when you started?
Yes.
Yes, but she
And
she
you
has
agree
testified
you
that she
determined
didn't. Well,
toxicology results in
she said she
all
didn't
or
intend
most of
to
those
do
cases.
anything.
Most, yes.
And you did order the blood alcohol test. Of
So you're gonna
the
believe her or the facts?
And you said he was a 0.38.
No, 0.13.
0.138. And you also ordered the vitreous level
Yes.
of alcohol as well. And the result was a 0.213.
Yes.
And you would agree that's about it's about 3 times the level.
Close, yes.
Now, you would agree that at those levels there are some pharmacologic effects from in the body.
Yes.
And I know you mentioned some, but you agree that that level of alcohol in the body would impair somebody's judgment
For most people, yes.
and their decision-making abilities.
Yes.
And it would release inhibitions.
Yes.
And they would be more apt to take risk that they otherwise would not.
Yes.
And of course, it would impair motor skills and potentially loss of balance.
Yes.
It would also impair coordination.
Yes.
And eye coordination as well as fine motor skills.
Yes.
It also impairs memory, alcohol does.
Yes.
No,
So
that's
there are
just because
lots
they were
of
afraid I'm going to
effects
show
that
my
alcohol
chest.
has on the body.
Yes.
Now, you're aware in this case that George Torres, the decedent, stepped into the suitcase under his own power in a game of hide and seek.
That's how it was reported to me. Yes.
Do you have any evidence to dispute that?
No.
Can you tell us when Mr. Torres drank the last drink he had prior to getting in the suitcase?
That I can't tell you because, if somebody had been drinking either periodically throughout a time period or continually throughout a time period, that's difficult to say.
So he could have stopped drinking an hour before he got into the suitcase, or 5 minutes before he got into the suitcase, or 4 hours before he got into the suitcase.
Yes.
We just don't know.
Correct.
Do you have any idea at the time of the autopsy whether or not he was in the elimination phase?
So
Metabolism.
he was in the metabolic phase. Yes.
The elimination phase is what I refer to it as. But
Yes.
okay. All right. Now I want to talk about time of death determination. It's fair to say that you did not go to the scene that day that Mr. Torres was found.
No, a medical legal death investigator from our office went to the scene.
So there was an investigator with your agency named Ashley Hammermeister
Yes.
that went to the scene,
Yes.
and she would have prepared a report.
Yes.
And you would have reviewed that report.
Yes.
Do you agree that fire and rescue assessed Mr. Torres at 1:07 p.m. on that date, February 24th of 2020?
Yes.
Does that sound about right based on your case file?
Yes.
And so this investigator that we mentioned, she did not arrive on scene till 6:27 p.m. So nearly 6 hours after the body was discovered, she arrived.
Yes.
And the body was laying supine, stretched out
Yes.
in front of the suitcase.
Yes.
Now you examined and assessed the body of Mr. Torres at the time of the autopsy.
Yes.
And you said that the body was ambient temperature.
Yes.
Is that the normal air temperature we're in today?
Whichever environment you're in. Yes.
So the body was not stored in a cooler for 24 hours.
No, the body was stored in the cooler, but in the mornings when we get there, the bodies are brought out of the cooler.
Okay. How long had the body been out of the cooler before it was examined by you? Do you know?
Most likely an hour to an hour and a half.
Now you said that the lividity was in the back, correct?
There's lividity in the back and also on the left side of the body as well.
And you agree the body is stored at the morgue on its back?
Correct.
Now, were you aware of the last time that Miss Boone, my client, actually saw her boyfriend alive or observed him in the video, in the suitcase by video from her phone?
I think in the report it was around 12:30 or 1 in the morning, somewhere around there.
Have you looked at either one of those videos from her phone?
I briefly saw one that the detective showed me.
Do you know if that was the 2-minute video or the 20-second video?
I believe it was the shorter one.
Okay. So would it be fair if I said the time last seen was around 11:30? Would you dispute that or?
No.
Okay. So really,
All the way to conviction
from
for
the
his
time-
client.
I guess it was 11:30 that evening with the videos, and then you understood that the body was found around 12 hours later the next day or so. Would you agree that the death occurred sometime within those 2 periods of time?
Yes.
We don't know exactly when that is. So
Yeah.
it would be a guess if we tried to speculate about that.
Yes.
Now, considering the 3,000 autopsies, how many cases have you ruled the cause of death as positional or postural asphyxia?
A handful of times. It's not very common.
So about 5 times or less?
Yes.
And we're going to talk about environmental suffocation in a little bit, but let's talk about this positional asphyxia component. What was your ruling in those 5 cases that you ruled that it was positional asphyxia? What was your ruling in terms of your diagnosis?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as to relevance.
Approach. The objection is sustained.
Doctor, you're familiar with Dr. DeMaio, Vincent DeMaio's textbook of forensic pathology?
Yes.
Would you agree that that's authoritative?
I'm sorry?
Would you agree that's authoritative or well-accepted book?
Yes.
Environmental suffocation is a lack of oxygen. You would agree?
Yes.
Now, how many of those cases of the 3,000 that you've done where you found environmental suffocation?
Probably 2 to 3.
So very few?
Yes.
In a positional asphyxia case, that's kind of an example, like you get stuck in a hole and as you breathe, you sink deeper into the hole or it tightens.
It can be anything that impairs the actual physical aspect of breathing. So that could be if the neck is flexed very much forward, so that way cutting off the air supply up towards the top of the head. That could be something compressing around the torso, so not being able to take a full breath. So those are examples of
Or another example may be falling out of a tree stand and getting suspended upside down.
Yes.
Or the majority of the blood gets in the top half of the body.
Yes.
Would you agree in those type situations that the deaths occur fairly quickly, usually within an hour?
They can. It depends again on the situation.
Now you said Mr. Torres was 5'2" and 103 pounds?
Yes.
Do you know how big the suitcase was that Mr. Torres was in?
I don't have the exact measurements with me.
So if I told you the measurements, you wouldn't know one way or the other what they were?
No, I think they were described to me and I saw the pictures from the scene and I was able to review crime scene photos to see what the actual suitcase was like.
Okay. Do you know the crown to rump length of Mr. Torres?
No.
Did you do any demonstrative study on the suitcase to determine what kind of spacing he would have inside that enclosure?
No.
And you don't know the position that Mr. Torres or his orientation at the time that he was in the suitcase was?
Again, I favor a fetal position, but again, I didn't observe him in the suitcase.
But you don't know exactly what the positional component was that caused or what led you to believe caused his death.
Correct. I mean, based on his stature and what the suitcase was, he would have had to have flexed at the hips and knees to be able to fit into the suitcase.
So based on what you said, you would agree you didn't know how much Mr. Torres would have been able to move and stretch his various extremities inside the suitcase, did you?
No.
So you would agree that his repositioning inside the suitcase would have been easier if he didn't have so much alcohol in his bloodstream?
I don't know that I would agree with that.
Excuse me?
I don't know that I would agree with that.
Well, you said his fine motor skills would be impaired by the alcohol.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you meant his ability to just move.
To reposition himself inside this, that would be limited to some degree by the alcohol he consumed.
It could be. I mean, that's not really a fine motor skill. But
Okay. Or the use of his hands to unzip the suitcase would
Sure.
be affected by the alcohol that he had consumed.
Sure, that could be.
Okay. Now, the environmental suffocation deals with the lack of oxygen.
Yes.
Correct? And due to that insufficient oxygen that we breathe in the air, so you essentially run out of the oxygen in the space.
Yes.
So I guess the years ago, how this sometimes would occur was a child would somehow get into an old refrigerator and it would be enclosed. So it was airtight and eventually you would run out of oxygen.
Yes.
You would agree with that?
Yes.
And I think you said the normal makeup of air has about 20% oxygen.
Yes.
So we had either a decrease in the oxygen levels or a low concentration of oxygen. In the
Yes. Yes. And also, keep in mind that while he's in there, every time he's exhaling, he's pushing out carbon dioxide. Okay, so again, whatever oxygen is there is most likely diminished because it is an enclosed space. It doesn't have to be no oxygen, but it's decreased from what we would have in a normal room. But every time that he's exhaling, there's more carbon dioxide that's in that space as well. So that displaces any oxygen that might be there too.
So what volume of air do we inhale and exhale in a normal breath at rest?
Well, it depends. I mean, you can take a deep breath, you can take a shallow breath. It depends. And then there's also the rate at which people breathe. So that's variable.
So if it was average, would you say 500 milliliters on average?
Depends on the person.
Well, would you agree that at rest, you take a normal number of breaths per minute of 12 to 14?
That would be considered the normal range, yes.
So 6 to 7 liters per minute
Yes.
at rest? Do you know the volume of room air contained in that suitcase?
No.
Do you know how porous the fabric of that suitcase was?
No.
Did you run any tests on the suitcase?
No.
Were you aware that the suitcase, the lock on it or the zipper on it was broken? The pull handles were broken?
Yes, I did know that.
Do you agree if there is a portion of the zipper that's open, that air can travel in and out of that space?
Yes.
Do you know what the anticipated exchange of gases would be through that fabric?
No.
Do you know if, the suitcase was out in the rain and it rained, do you know whether or not rain or the liquid would pierce the interior?
I don't know.
So from what I gather, no studies were done on the suitcase.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So we don't know that zipper being busted, what exchange of air could go in and out.
Correct.
I'm waiting for if your car was traveling at the speed of light and you turn on your lights, do they work?
Physiological effects once the value or percentage of oxygen is decreased from the norm?
Yes.
You said 8 to 10%, you become unconscious.
Yes.
and then a value of less than 8%.
I feel a lot better.
For most people, yes.
Excuse me?
For most people,
And the normal oxygen saturation in adults and children is 95 to 100%.
yes.
So if it decreases, the oxygen decreases less than 10%, someone would lose consciousness and die within less than 30 minutes.
So that's hard to give a time frame on that. Studies that have been done shown that the oxygen, content is anywhere from 4 to 6. Unconsciousness can occur in less than a minute, death within minutes. But those have been empirical studies.
So, and I know that's kind of, maybe you tell me, is that kind of why you gave the 2 different diagnoses, the environmental and the positional, is because the environmental may have had an effect or the positional may have had an effect. You're not sure, so you listed them both?
It's not that I'm not sure. I think that both mechanisms were at play at the same time, and that's not unusual in deaths, is there can be multiple factors occurring at the same time.
But you don't know the percentages, 50% for one or 70% for one, 30 for the other. You don't know.
No.
But you
Only
would
in
be
my chat
concert if these
would I get
two
a
causes,
reasonable response to that
the
question.
positional as well as the environmental, if they were acting in concert, that would render a relatively short amount of survival time.
I can't say.
You just don't know.
No.
Now, we talked about these blunt force injuries, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Would it be fair to the jury to say that there were no broken bones?
There were no broken bones.
And it would be fair to say that the blunt force injuries on his body that the jury has seen here today did not contribute to the cause of his death.
Not likely.
And I think you didn't put that anywhere in your report. That it
No.
did not.
I included it in my report. I did not include it on the death certificate.
As the reason or cause, contributing cause of the death.
Correct.
Judge, can I put up a couple of those exhibits?
It may not have contributed to the cause of death, but it's clear she intended for it to.
There was a baseball bat that was gathered in evidence in this case.
I didn't hear about that until later.
When is later? When did you first learn about the baseball?
That might have been around the time that I was sitting for a deposition, but I can't quite remember. I don't have the file folder. I don't know when I was deposed.
I'm going to show you this exhibit. This is number 14. And this composite exhibit is state's exhibit, I believe, number 13. This is picture number 14. You see the, you said they were circular type injuries.
Yes.
And you've seen a regular baseball bat or a kid's baseball bat.
Yes.
A wooden bat. And if you were to swing that bat and hit somebody's body or hit a suitcase and the blunt force, that would be a linear line across that person.
It could be depending on the position of the body, the position of the suitcase, and the position or how the object came in contact.
What is a linear injury mean?
So linear injury is if you think, linear, it's more like a line.
Okay. Now, if you took the barrel of the bat, the very end of the barrel of the bat, and you poked into the suitcase with the barrel of that bat, would those spots there in this exhibit, is that consistent?
That's compatible with that, yes.
Excuse me?
That's compatible.
And then here's close up. This is picture number 15. Again, close up. Same question. Would that be consistent with poking the suitcase if he's in the suitcase at the time thrusting the barrel of that bat, the crown of that bat would potentially let those stop injury.
Yes, it's compatible with that.
Now, I want to draw your attention to the cardiovascular system. Do you have your report?
I do.
Okay. You described the proximal third of the left anterior descending coronary artery having greater than a 75% narrowing of the lumen due to its centrically placed firm yellow-white fibrolipid atherosclerotic plaque?
Yes.
And is that pretty much verbatim with what you said in the report?
Yes.
And that terminology is synonymous with a single vessel, high-grade atherosclerotic coronary artery disease.
Yes.
And in that location, it's kind of a classic location for what people refer to as the widowmaker.
Yes.
Because the location in that vessel that supplies most of the circulation to the left ventricle.
Yes.
If you had a spasm in that artery, that could nearly
Isn't
totally
helping.
obstruct the lumen and cause a fatal heart attack, could it not?
It could cause a dysrhythmia, yes.
I'm sorry?
A dysrhythmia or an abnormal beating
Yeah.
of the heart.
That could
Dysrhythmia.
kill him.
It could.
Just another word for what you said there, my
The
friend.
lumen is the inside space of the
This isn't
tubular
helping.
structure
Yes.
of that, and so that was blocked over 75%.
It was, but there was no evidence of myocardial scarring. So when the vessels become blocked, you prevent blood from getting to the muscle of the heart. So there was no evidence that there was any scarring. There was no evidence that there was anything that happened acutely. When that happens, we can see changes in the actual muscle of the heart. So there were no changes suggestive of that.
Well, let me ask you something. If you
So,
would get out of the suitcase on his own,
try again.
he would have passed out or fell asleep on the couch, and she would have woken up the next day about that time and came down. And he was dead on the couch. And you did this autopsy. Would it be fair to say
He sounds like an insurance
that,
company.
in your ruling on cause of death,
That's a standard
that
defense.
single vessel coronary
Yeah.
artery
They're about to have this injury
osteosclerosis
anyway.
would be your probable cause
The
of
accident,
death?
the car accident had nothing to
Could
do
be,
with it.
but any sort of injury overrides natural disease if the injury is significant, right? So you don't have to be a perfectly healthy person to have trauma and die. So it's very common that we see people that have injuries for
Yeah.
whatever reason, but also have a lot of natural disease. But we look at it as the injuries override the natural disease because especially atherosclerotic disease, that's considered long-term, right? So that's been going on for years and years. People walk around with that all the time. So what's different is that we have trauma. And so that overrides natural disease. And sometimes natural disease can contribute, but again, it depends on the individual. It depends on the circumstances.
So absent the positional asphyxia or the environmental asphyxia, and he was dead, and you did the autopsy.
Oh, no.
It would be fair to say that you would determine this was a natural death from an isolated coronary heart disease, would you not?
It would depend on the circumstances. And I can't speculate on this case because I know what I know about
If
it.
you had nothing else, the widowmaker would have caused his death, or you would have to have assumed, having nothing else. that
Oh,
would have caused his
please.
death.
I most likely would have given him cardiovascular disease.
Now, this ethanol metabolism that we talked about earlier, and there's a question about you believing he was in the elimination phase, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is it fair to say that George Torres, the decedent, was in the elimination phase since the blood ethanol was below the vitreous value?
Yes.
Given the vitreous value was a 213, is it justified in saying the decedent's blood ethanol level was at least a 0.213 prior to starting the elimination phase?
Yes.
And now you know that the normal elimination rate is, I believe, 0.015% per hour.
Yes.
Is that standard?
It's an estimate.
And so we have a difference of a 0.138 to the 213. So roughly 5 hours of elimination. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
So in other words, you would agree there's a short interval where the vitreous and the blood are identical.
Yes.
And then the blood drops beneath the vitreous value as ethanol is metabolized in the blood.
Yes.
So is it fair to say, given the significant difference in the blood and the vitreous ethanol values, that the true vitreous and blood ethanol level had to be much higher than what is reported in your report at the time that he passed?
At the time that he passed? No, this is reflective of the time that he passed.
Say again?
This is reflective, the 0.139, that's reflective of the time that he passed. There's not, metabolism after death of the alcohol.
All right. Well, let me. What I'm saying is, he could have been prior to that time of passing. He could have his blood alcohol level would have been much higher.
It was at least the same level as the
At least the two.
Yes.
At least the 213.
Yes.
It could have been much higher.
It could have been, yes.
Judge, if I could approach.
You may.
This is defense composite exhibit identification J.
Has the state seen it?
Yes.
We stipulate J into evidence.
Was pre-marked as defense J, will be received into evidence without objection as defense 1.
Judge, can I publish these?
You may.
Ma'am, there's 5 photographs. I'm just confirming the offense. The first one's number 5. What does this depict?
So that's the left hand. So you're looking at the outer surface of the hand, the knuckles, and the 3 of the fingers.
Bruise there on his top of his left hand?
Yes.
All right, and the same for picture number 4.
So that's the same, just a little bit further away and without a scale.
And then here is picture number 3.
So now you're looking at the thumb and the index finger?
And then it shows some bruising on the hand.
Yes.
And here's picture number 2.
So what you're seeing here is, from the scene, our investigators put brown bags over the decedent's hands, and that's, we collect evidence at the time of the autopsy. So at the scene, brown bags are put on the hands to preserve any evidence. And so that's why you're seeing this, because this is a picture that we take. We cut the bag open and we take a picture to show exactly what the hands look like.
You agree there's the bruising here? On the
Yes,
back of the
there.
hand, and also up around the knuckle area?
Yes.
The fingers, and also on the section here?
Yes.
And then here's the last picture, number 5, which again is the left hand.
Yes.
Showing the bruising on the top of the hand as well as the knuckle area.
Yes.
Thank you, Doctor.
Any redirect examination?
Yes, John.
You may proceed.
Those are the exhibits you didn't see.
About the alcohol level in this case. And I believe there was a term, metabolic phase or elimination phase. Could you just explain for us what that is?
Sure. So in the toxicology testing, there's two different levels that I ordered for levels of alcohol. One is they look in the blood to see the level of alcohol. The other is in what's called vitreous fluid or eye fluid. And we look at both areas because that can give us an idea of whether somebody is metabolizing through the alcohol or whether it's still rising. It just gives us an idea sometimes of how close to death they were when the ingestion of alcohol happened. But
I would, but that's just wrong.
there will be a small point in time, as we discussed earlier, that they will be almost the same. But you can just think of it as the blood alcohol goes up, and then a brief period of time later, the alcohol in the eye fluid will start to show. So again, it's just to give us an idea of whether somebody is metabolizing or whether they're still, the level is still rising, or if they're still, intaking alcohol.
So the result in this case was indicative that George Torres's level was coming down.
Yes.
And I think some of the math was a little bit difficult to follow on the fly. But with that rate of dissipation, would it be fair to say that he would have been in that suitcase for approximately 5 hours, because he couldn't be drinking whilst in the suitcase, that we're seeing this rate decrease between these two levels?
Well, you have to be careful how you interpret it, because the numbers that I have from toxicology testing, that's from one point in time. Right? We're collecting those specimens at the time of the autopsy. So that's only one point in time. It's possible, but I can't say for certain. All I can tell you is that at some point in time, his blood alcohol was at least the higher level that we saw in the vitreous fluid. So if, the calculation of the 5 hours, that's an estimate, because again, everyone's a little bit different. But I think it's reasonable to say 5 hours. Yes, that's within reason to say that.
And obviously a pretty obvious point, but we don't continue to metabolize alcohol after death.
Correct.
You were asked about studies or tests being performed on the suitcase in this case.
Correct.
Would the presence of objects in that suitcase also affect the length of time a person may have survived in that suitcase?
I guess if there were a lot of other objects in there.
I did. Now I just do them for
That
free.
maybe could, occlude the mouth or nose, or maybe if that means that there's more stuff in the suitcase, there's less room for the person. So I guess.
Another variable that would also be present would be the opening of that zipper, would it not?
Yes.
So if the zipper was further open, potentially more oxygen could be coming into that area. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, there could be more oxygen coming in, but that's always the question is, would it be enough? Right? Because you can still have oxygen there, but it may not be enough. And again, for kind of the factors that I talked about before.
And there would be no way to know exactly how far that zipper was potentially forced open.
Correct.
I have no further questions.
Can this witness be released?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Jill. All right, thank you, ma'am. The parties approach for a moment.
She did a great job. Expert testimony is always boring. That was no exception, but she did everything the state wanted her to do as their expert. I'd cringed through the whole thing thinking of his horrible death. They're using it several ways. The defense is trying to do some wacky thing like he did it to himself as well. So one thing is that by looking at how long it, you know, how much of it has left, they can
We did
create
get
a
little bit later
timeline.
start this morning due to those security issues. Do any of y'all need to take a break at this point in time? Raise your hands if you do. All right, court seeing no hands. State, you may call your next witness.
State calls Jay Regier. Photoshopped onto Borat. This should be exciting. Bama Mike in the house. Yeah, I get it. They're trying to poke holes in that, but in order to do it, he just had to sit there and marinate in the horribleness of the victim's death without really making any points. I don't mean to be too critical because this case sucks. When your client puts someone in a suitcase, zips it up, they beg to get out, and they won't do it, then proceeds to admit that they pushed him down and hit them while they were in the suitcase, your arguments are limited.
Which is number one.
Members of the
Wrong.
jury, I have a matter I've got to take up with counsel outside of your presence. I promise it won't take too long. We'll bring you back in as quickly as possible. Again, same instruction I've given you previously. Please don't conduct any independent or investigation or research regarding the persons, places, things, or charge involved, and do not have any conversations
I
among
find
yourselves
it
or anyone
quite
else about those things.
interesting.
We'll bring you back in as promptly as possible. Thank you.
Number one, wrong. Know what I'm saying? Number one, wrong. Know what I'm saying? We are the law talk with my crew. Number one, wrong. Know what I'm saying? Number one, wrong. Know what I'm saying? Number one, wrong. Know what I'm saying?
Y'all may be seated. Thank you.
Judge, James Owens here, and I'm here with Sarah Boone. The first exhibit is State's Exhibit F for identification. It is the title Stipulation Victim Identification, and it is signed by Mr. Cacciatore, Sarah Boone, and myself, October 2nd, 2024.
And the other stipulation?
The other is a stipulation of FDLE report, again signed by Dave Cacciatore Jr., Sarah Boone, and James Owens. It is it's listed as identification for identification States Exhibit N. It is a two-page FDLE laboratory report generated June 3rd of 2020.
Can you approach with both of those documents, please? Thank you. State, anything else to add over and above what Mr. Owens identified?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. Boone, good morning. You were previously sworn earlier today. I hold in my hand two stipulations. The first stipulation, pre-marked as State's Exhibit F, reads Stipulation of Victim Identification. reads as follows. The Assistant State Attorney, Dave Cacciatore Jr., the defendant, Sarah Boone, as well as his lawyer, we have a scrivener's error there, James Sullivan, okay. Sullivan Owens stipulate that the identity of the deceased in this case is George Torres. Signed the 2nd day of October, 2024. Ma'am, have you had the opportunity to go over this stipulation with your attorney?
Yes.
Do you understand what this stipulation means?
Yes.
Are you freely and willingly entering into this stipulation?
I am.
Did anyone force you, threaten you, or coerce you to enter into this stipulation?
No.
All right, the court accepts this stipulation. How do we want to handle the little issue with regard to his lawyer as opposed to her lawyer?
I'm fine with the court making an edit to scratch out his and insert her if that's acceptable with the defense.
Acceptable?
Yes.
Ma'am, is that acceptable to you as well?
It is.
All right, thank you. The court will make that handwritten interlineation, removing his and adding her. State, do you seek, we'll move this into evidence in front of the jury, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you, sir. Moving now to what was pre-marked as State's N. Ma'am, this is a stipulation of FDLE report. It reads, the Assistant State Attorney, Dave Cacciatore Jr., and defendant Sarah Boone, as well as his lawyer, James Sullivan Owens, stipulate to the admissibility into evidence at trial of the FDLE lab report authored by Carolina Benito on June 3, 2020. It bears Mr. Cacciatore's signature, your signature, and the signature of your attorney, Mr. Owens. Have you had the opportunity to review this stipulation with your attorney?
Yes.
Have you had the opportunity to review the 2-page FDLE report that will be attached to it?
Yes.
Do you understand what this stipulation means?
Yes.
Are you entering into this stipulation freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
Did anyone force you, threaten you, or coerce you to enter into this stipulation?
No.
All right, the court accepts this stipulation. Any issue with striking through his and adding her state?
No, Your Honor.
No, sir. All right, the court will make that interlineation as well. Anything else we need to address, state? I will return these to you for the purposes of moving them into evidence with regard to these two stipulations.
Yes, Your Honor.
So nothing else?
Nothing else.
Okay, thank you. Defense, anything else? All right, thank you very much. Anything else we need to address before we bring back in our panel?
No, sir. No, Your Honor.
All right, let's go ahead and stand and bring back in our panel.
Just trying to make sure we didn't see the jurors. I'm a responsible YouTuber.
Jury entering.
State, do you recognize our jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense, do you recognize our jury?
Yes.
All right, members of the jury, thank you. You can be seated. Members of the jury, Ken, if you could just confirm that you complied with the court's instructions during that short break by raising your hands. Record reflect that all juror members have raised their hands. State, you may proceed with your evidence and testimony presentation.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we'd like to move what's been pre-marked for identification as states F and states N into evidence.
Any objections?
No objection.
All right, what was pre-marked as states F will be received without objection as state 14. What's been pre-marked as states N will be received into evidence without objection at state 15.
And Your Honor, we would request that they be published.
Thank you. Members of the jury, I'm going to read to you some stipulations along with an instruction. When the parties agree that certain facts are true, that is called a stipulation of fact. You must accept stipulated facts as having been proven. However, the significance of these facts, as with all facts, is for you to decide. In this case, the stipulated facts that you must accept as true are as follows. Stipulation of victim identification. The Assistant State Attorney, Dave Cacciatore Jr., and Defendant, Sarah Boone, as well as her lawyer, James Sullivan Owens, stipulate that the identity of the deceased in this case is George Torres. Stipulation of FDLE report. The Assistant State Attorney, Dave Cacciatore Jr., and Defendant, Sarah Boone, as well as her lawyer, James Sullivan Owens, stipulate to the admissibility into stipulate into evidence at trial of the FDLE lab report authored by Carolina Benito on June 3, 2020. With that, State, you can call your next witness.
Meredith McCaskill.
I do.
Ma'am, good morning. Could you please take a seat and state and spell your name for the record for us?
My name is Meredith McCaskill, and it's spelled MEredithMcCaskill.
Thank you. Mr. J, you may inquire.
Thank you. Where do you work, ma'am?
I am employed at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the Orlando Regional Operations Center.
And is that also called FDLE?
Yes, it is.
And what do you do for FDLE?
I am a senior crime laboratory analyst in the biology DNA section.
And what is your educational background? We'll get into training and experience as well, but what's your educational background that allows you to do that job?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Biological Sciences from Clemson University and a Master of Science in Biomedical Forensic Science from the Boston University School of Medicine.
And when did you first start working for FDLE?
I started at FDLE in April of 2011.
Did you have any prior work experience as a forensic examiner of blood or biological or DNA evidence?
No, I did not.
So for the last 13 years, your experience has been with the FDLE?
Yes, that's correct.
And do you have any sort of in-house training and then continuing education that goes on as an employee at FDLE?
Yes. So when you become a crime laboratory analyst, you have to successfully complete a training program. This training program takes about 1.5 to 2 years. It covers all of our policies and procedures and manuals, reading textbooks and scientific articles, and performing a lot of in-house testing and training under the supervision of a qualified analyst. There's also written and oral examinations, and you have to successfully complete every part of that in order to work cases as a crime laboratory analyst. And then every year we have continuing education. So that's education that we need to do in order to stay current with new trends and technologies in the field.
Does the lab itself enjoy any accreditations, and what process, if so, does it go through to get them?
Yes, FDLE is accredited by an organization called ANAB. It's the American National Standards Institute National Accreditation Board. So we've been accredited for, I believe, over 30 years. It's a process where every 4 years they send people to come and inspect our lab, make sure that we're doing everything that we're supposed to be doing according to our policies and procedures. And then we're also following national standards that have been set down. That's every 4 years. It's very in-depth. And then we have additional kind of like spot checks every year just to make sure that we are maintaining everything that we are supposed to be doing.
Have you ever given testimony in court about your opinion about serology analysis or DNA analysis?
Yes, I have.
Approximately how many times?
Approximately 35 to 40 times.
Have you ever not been allowed to give opinion testimony in those areas?
No, I have not.
Can you tell us about the place, particularly within FDLE? Tell us about your workspace and what personal protection equipment you may wear when you're doing DNA analysis.
Yes, so in my workspace, I have what I call a clean side, which is where I keep all of my paperwork. And then I have my other side, which is used for actual screening of evidence items. So this is a surface where I can clean it with a detergent. I clean all of the instruments that I'm using. So scissors, markers to take notes, anything like that is cleaned with a detergent, both before I start and after I finish. And it's cleaned and maintained in between every item of evidence. So only one item of evidence is open at a time, and this is to minimize any potential contamination. So DNA from one item getting into DNA from a second item. I also wear what is called personal protective equipment. This includes a lab coat, face mask, gloves, and potentially a hairnet, depending on what type of evidence that I'm working with. And then the gloves are disposable, so they are changed before and after each item of evidence. It's also changed if I have to touch my computer to take notes, I change my gloves. If I have to touch another surface, I change my gloves. So it's a lot of procedures that we use in order to prevent my DNA from getting onto the item of evidence.
When DNA analysis is done, are instruments used to assist you in that process?
Yes, we have an instrument platform that we use that allows us to run the DNA in batches in a efficient manner. So there's multiple instruments that are used across the varying processes.
And do these instruments generate paperwork that humans such as yourself can then go read and interpret?
Yes, it does.
Now, in this particular case, you are not the analyst who examined the items. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you review the information that is generated by the instruments used by the analyst who did this work in coming to your own conclusions?
I was the technical reviewer on this file, so I reviewed all of the documentation and the paperwork and also the original analyst report.
All right. Now, one of the items that is said to have been analyzed was a DNA card. Are you familiar with what that is?
Yes, I am.
And can you tell the jury what that is?
Usually it's referred to as a DNA card or a blood stain card, and that's just a card where somebody can spot blood, usually human blood, on it and dry it down. Then the analyst can take a cutting of that stained area in order to generate a DNA profile.
And is that typically the manner in which a decedent or a dead person's DNA sample is provided to the lab for analysis?
Yes, that's a very common thing that we see in decedents.
And can you explain to the jury how it is an analyst such as yourself would take that blood stain on a portion of the DNA card and develop a DNA profile?
Yes, so it usually is blood stained on the card, so you can identify that stain visually, take a cutting of that stained area, and then place that cutting into a sterile tube, which is then sent through the DNA process. So that's adding chemicals and heat in order to break the cells open and release the DNA into the solution, and then running it through the rest of the procedures where we determine about how much DNA is in the sample, make millions of copies of our specific areas of interest, and then generate a DNA profile that can be used for comparison to any questioned items in the case.
Do you use some sort of commercial kit to develop DNA profiles on known items such as this?
Yes, we do.
Approximately how many locations back in 2020 would have been tested on this DNA card?
In 2020, it was 21 locations.
And in going through this process, is there a process that amplifies the amount of DNA?
Yes, there is.
Can you describe that?
Yes, so we need to amplify or make millions of copies of the specific areas of interest that we're looking for. We don't want to make copies of the entire DNA molecule. We're just wanting to isolate those specific 21 areas and make copies of those specific areas in order to generate the DNA profile that we use in forensic DNA analysis.
And do you know what a short tandem repeat is?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
Short tandem repeat, we also call them STRs. That's just what we're looking for in the forensic DNA analysis. There are short areas of repeating DNA pieces. So for example, at somebody's DNA profile at a specific location, you can have a set of 16 repeats and a set of 17 repeats. And that's just this one little piece of DNA, and it repeats 16 times. And then you have a piece that repeats 17 times.
And you said you might be a 16 at one spot and 17. Let's just be clear what we're talking about. On one particular location, well, all of them, do you get DNA from mom and dad? Can you explain that?
Yes. So you get DNA from your parents. So it's inherited. You get half of your DNA from your mom and half from your dad. So when I'm talking about the short tandem repeats and the example of a 16 and a 17, that could mean that you got a set of 16 repeats from one parent and a set of 17 repeats from the other parent. So it's just the copies that you get from your parents.
And you might happen to have 16 from each.
Yes, that's also a possibility.
All right. And so the chemicals end up copying about, you said 21 areas in 2020?
Yes, so there's 21, and then we look at several areas that are on the gender marker. So it was 3 areas on the gender markers.
And each of these locations will come up with some sort of number like 16, 17, 4, 4, so on and so forth.
Yes, that's correct.
Were you in reviewing the instrumentation data in this case, was the DNA profile that was said to have come from Mr. Torres, was there able to be a full DNA profile at those 21 locations developed?
Yes, a complete profile was obtained for that sample.
Now, can you tell us what a buccal or a buccal swab, sometimes people call it each, which way is the right way?
I usually use the word buccal, but buccal is not incorrect either.
All right, what is that?
It's just a swab that we can use as a reference sample from a person. So it looks, all of our swabs just kind of look like a long Q-tip with only one end. And then you just take that cotton tip end and rub it on the interior of your mouth to get a good DNA sample. You have a lot of cells on the inside of your mouth and a lot of saliva. So that's a good source to use for a known sample from a person.
And these long Q-tips, I believe, as you described, are they put into a box that is designed in a way so that the Q-tip doesn't touch the edges of the box?
Yes, I've seen it in boxes like that, but I have also seen it where they've been put back into the original paper packet container. So either method is fine.
And did the FDLE in this particular case, in the data that you reviewed, was there buccal swabs represented as being from the defendant, Sarah Boone?
Yes, there was.
And in the process that you've briefly described for the jury already, can you just tell us if it's different in any way to take a part of that cotton swab to develop a DNA profile than a piece of the DNA paper?
No, it's the same process. With the buccal swabs, I'm just taking a small cutting of the cotton area of the swab, placing it in a tube, and then running it through the exact same DNA process.
And was a full profile at the 21 locations able to be developed for the buccal swabs represented as being from Ms. Boone?
Yes, a complete profile was obtained for that sample.
Were there also what we call unknown samples that were examined in this case?
Yes, there were.
And you
Only
can
allowed to talk with
describe the
Mike.
difference between a known and an unknown sample for the jury.
Yes, a known sample is a sample from a specific person. So that's like the example of a buccal swab. I know that sample came from that individual, and I can use that as a way to determine that particular person's DNA profile. An unknown sample is just a sample where we don't know whose DNA or if there is any DNA on that sample at all. So those are question items that can be, once a DNA profile is obtained from that item, can be compared to the known profiles obtained from individuals.
And in this case, was there an unknown item labeled as DNA swabs representative coming from Mr. Torres's fingernails?
I believe it was fingernail clippings from Mr. Torres, yes.
All right, and typically, I know you didn't do the work on this particular case, but in reviewing the notes and in your experience, do DNA samples from fingernail clippings come in as swabs, like a buccal swab?
So sometimes they can come in as swabs, but other times they come in as just fingernail clippings. So taking the clippers and just cutting off the ends of the fingernails. And then I've also seen it where they've been scraped using pointed sticks.
And so if there is a swab that came in represented as being from the fingernails, then that would go through the process as you previously described for the buccal swabs.
Yes, that's correct.
And if it comes in as fingernails or scrapings, do you all have to make your own swabs?
Yes, that's correct.
And how would you go about doing that?
We have prepackaged swabs in our lab. We can then use some sterile deionized water and drip that onto the end of the cotton tip to make it a little bit moist so that it can pick up any DNA that is left on the item. And then we just swab the surface of the item, allow the swab to dry, and then cut it and place it into a tube for the DNA process. So we're just making our own swabs at that point.
And was there a profile obtained from what was represented as being a DNA sample from Mr. Torres's fingernail clippings?
Yes, there was.
And did it match either of the two known profiles that we've just discussed here this morning?
Yes, it did.
Which one?
Mr. Torres.
Were there any results indicating foreign DNA on this item?
No, there were no DNA results foreign to Mr. Torres obtained from either set of fingernail clippings.
Likewise, was there something examined in this case represented to be swabs or DNA samples from Ms. Boone, the defendant's fingernails?
Yes, those were swabs that were sent represented as being from her fingernails.
And so just like the buccal swabs, they come in as a Q-tip and then you would test that in a similar manner?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, there was.
And did that profile match either of the two known profiles that we've been discussing this morning?
Yes, it did.
And whose was that?
Miss Boone's.
Now, in regards to both of these last items that we've talked about, the fingernail swabs from each Mr. Torres and Miss Boone, is it expected that their profile would be developed from DNA swabs from their fingernails?
Yes, it is. All of those samples were represented as being from those particular individuals. So their DNA is expected to be on those items.
Was there any DNA foreign to Miss Boone on those samples that were representative as coming from her fingernails?
No, there were no DNA results foreign to Miss Boone obtained from either set of fingernail swabs.
Now, with this amplification process that you've described, is it PCR?
Yes, it is.
How sensitive is it when a sample is taken from an unknown area, such as fingernails?
The PCR process is pretty sensitive, and over the years, as the science has evolved and testing has changed, the process has become even more sensitive over the years.
And hypothetically, if two people are living together and are intimate partners, quite frankly, would you expect the intimate partner's DNA to show up on swabbings from their fingernails?
Yes, it's possible that their DNA would show up if they're in close contact with each other.
But in this particular case, after reviewing all of the instrumentation data, there was no DNA foreign to either of their fingernail clippers, both clippings or swabs from their fingernails, both Mr. Torres and Ms. Boone.
Yes, that's correct.
No other questions?
Any cross-examination?
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Once you develop a profile, are you able to take that profile and compare it to other possible DNA on objects or items?
Well, if it's a DNA profile that is obtained from a questioned item, we can compare that to profiles from known individuals.
And in this case, an example of that, if an object from an unknown source, you could take that and compare it to a known profile. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And if you get a match with that comparison, what can you take from that?
Just that is the DNA profiles are the same.
So if it's an object, let's say like a bat, and there's a DNA profile that's obtained from the bat, and it matches a known profile, could you make the conclusion that that person touched or handled that bat from the known profile?
No, I can't. There's nothing in the testing that we do at FDLE that will allow me to determine how any DNA ended up on an object or how long it's been on that object.
Now, you said that in this case, what was sent for DNA comparison?
In this case, there was a blood stain card or a DNA card represented as being from Mr. Torres, buccal swabs represented as being from Miss Boone, fingernail clippings from both hands represented as being from Mr. Torres, and then fingernail swabs from both hands represented as being from Miss Boone.
Those are the only items that were sent to your lab for comparison.
Those were the only items sent to the DNA lab, yes.
Thank you, ma'am. I have no further questions.
Any redirect examination?
No redirection can be excused as far as the state is concerned.
Defense?
Yes.
All right, ma'am, you're excused. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
State, you may call your next witness.
Well, day one, that was a lot better. We had videos and all that stuff. This is all necessary. You have to do it to get through the trial, but boring stuff.
Ma'am, good morning. If you could take a seat, state your name and spell it for the record, please.
First name is Janella, Junella. Last name is Wadden, UAD as in Delta, AN.
May it please the court?
May proceed, sir.
Where do you work, ma'am?
I'm currently employed with the Orange County Sheriff's Office here in Orlando, Florida.
What does Sheriff Mina currently having you do?
I'm currently, my current position is a digital forensic examiner.
And how long have you held that position?
I just hit 6 years.
And can you tell us about, we're going to break it down, education, training, and experience. Let's just talk about your education. What's your educational background prior to becoming a law enforcement officer? In particular, what is relevant to being a digital forensic examiner?
I actually started in crime scene investigations with the Sheriff's Office. So I have a bachelor's in forensic science through the University of Central Florida. Upon transferring over to our digital forensics unit, I became a certified computer forensic examiner through the International Association of Computer Investigation Specialists.
That's IACIS?
ISIS, yes.
Can we call it ISIS?
Yes.
How do you say it?
IASIS.
IASIS. All right. I just want to shorten it for today.
Yes.
All right. So IASIS. Tell us about that program that you went through with IASIS to become a digital forensics examiner.
Yes, the beginning portion of it is in classroom training. It's normally only hosted in 2 different locations around the world, one being here in Orlando, the other one normally being somewhere over in Europe. They actually just expanded a 3rd location over in Australia. So again, the first 2 weeks are in classroom training, normally with over 300 other students. And then the next 5 to 6 months are all a peer review type training where they give you problem sets on how to, it goes from basic education on computer forensics to how to recover data. Could be pictures, could be videos. You're not sure until you pass one step to move on to the next one to figure out what you're essentially what kind of questions you're going to get.
All right. We'll take a break from the education training experience for 1 second. On February 23rd, 2020, were you called out to a scene?
Yes.
And does that happen from time to time as a digital forensic examiner as opposed to your previous duties like a CSI, which would always go to the scene?
Yes, as a digital forensic examiner, we are required to come out on scenes if requested.
May I approach the witness with E for identification?
You may.
Showing you E for identification, do you recognize states E for identification?
Yes.
And how is it that you recognize that?
I recognize the front label or the portion filled out on the envelope with my handwriting, as well as evidence tape sealed, also initialed with my initials.
And the information on it includes like your case number and some of the other information you just answered?
Yes, case number, date of collection, and the item description.
And what is said to be contained inside of that envelope?
An Apple iPhone Model XS with a pink case.
All right, and if I am not incorrect, I believe there's 2 sets of evidence tape on that item?
Yes.
Can you tell us about each set?
The first set, which is the red tape here, initially when I collect or sometimes when we receive items from crime scene investigators, the packaging necessarily doesn't have to be sealed just because the phone might have to be kept charged on prior to us receiving the phone. So in this case, I did collect the item from the residence. I brought it back to our office. And then once I was done with my exam, it later gets sealed, again, with my initials and dates. And if there's a later on an evidence review or somebody needs to review the item again, if we need to do an additional examination, the package might be reopened and then resealed again, hence the blue tape here at the bottom.
All right, other than the blue tape, is that item and the packaging substantially in the same condition when you were done examining what is said to be contained inside?
Yes.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
If you would, could you open up this package and without showing it to the jury at this point, see if you recognize what's inside of the envelope?
Yes, there's a phone with a pink case inside.
Do you recognize that as the item that you collected from the scene that you went to on February 23rd, 2020, and then later examined?
Yes.
All right. So this scene, February 23rd, 2020, where is this scene?
I believe it's 4740, or can I refer to my report for the address or to the numerical?
If it would refresh.
The
memory refreshed.
Yes.
What is your answer?
4748 Franz, not sure if I'm saying that correct, court, apartment number 3.
Now, I know you work for the sheriff's office in Orange County, but I still need to ask, is this in Orange County, Florida?
Yes.
All right. Now, you collected that item. May I move E for identification and evidence at this time?
Any objections?
No objection.
what was pre-marked as E will be received into evidence without objection as state 16.
Did you do anything with that item while you were on scene?
Yes.
What is it that you did with that item while you were on scene?
I was requested to come out. I was informed from the detectives that the user of the device gave consent for us to download her phone. So I responded out, and once I located the phone, I immediately started to extract the data from the phone.
All right. So now let's talk about what tools you use to do that. I assume there's some software involved with this process.
Yes.
Can you tell us about your familiarity and the training that you had in regards to using that software back in the time of February 2020?
Yes. One of the main tools that we use for data extraction is called Cellbrite. I did obtain, again, transitioning to our digital forensics unit, I obtained 2 certificates with Cellbrite, which is an operator certificate, knowing how to operate the hardware and the extraction software, as well as a certificate in their physical analyzer software, which is more used for the analysis part. So once we download the phone, we get a digital file, which to us is a lot of data, which humans, we can't read. So their software basically makes it more readable for us humans, which we can then generate a report in different formats for review. So in this case, we used Cellbrite. They actually started to develop software for cell phone companies. So if you remember back in the day when you went to go upgrade your phone and you had to go into a brick and mortar store, they actually had the software to help transfer your old data from your old phone and transfer it to your new phone, like your contacts, your pictures, your videos, a lot of the data that you didn't want to lose when upgrading your phone. But they are now a predominantly digital forensics company, and they provide the software that we use to extract data off of digital devices.
And is there any hardware involved to use this software?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yes, in this case, and especially at that time, we had 2 options. There was a portable tablet. In this case, you can still use a computer, and they have sister software that mirrors the exact same software that's on the portable tablet. So in this case, I had my call-out laptop with the extraction software installed on it. And just like you would to connect your phone to, let's say, your computer to export photos or take photos off of your phone if you want to save them, we're doing essentially the exact same thing in the field where we're connecting it to our computer, and we're letting the software pull all that data or the contents off of that phone.
When you were told that you had Miss Boone's password to her phone device, do you do anything to try and make sure that the data cannot be manipulated or destroyed from the outside world?
Yes, it's standard protocol. Like once we receive a phone, hopefully somebody did it before it's handed to us. But again, if we're responding out to the scene or we're the only ones that are interacting with the phone, we for sure try to, if we are given a passcode, we try to confirm the passcode. And then the phone is immediately put into airplane mode, which will disconnect it from any outside network. And we also try to ensure, because not always, once you place your phone into airplane mode, it doesn't always turn off your Bluetooth and or Wi-Fi connections. So we may go in and make sure that those settings are also disabled before we extract the data.
All right. Take us through this extraction process. I understand that there are many different levels of information that you can get depending on a lot of things that you'll tell us about. Can you tell us the level of extraction you were able to do on site with this cellular phone device?
Yes, for this specific phone, we were trying to minimally get the user data. Again, the stuff that you guys can see when you're looking through your phone, your calls, your messages, your pictures, your videos. And in this case, that's the level of support that the on-scene software that we're able to use is able to download from the phone, especially with having a password or passcode.
All right. So I think we're all familiar with Windows. I think Mac has its own special iOS operating system as well. Can you tell us about the operating system that was on this particular cellular phone device?
Yes, Apple has its own operating system, iOS if you have an iPhone, and of course, even if you have Android or Apple, you're constantly getting notifications saying it's time to update your phone to the newest software. So in this case, it's an iPhone, so it's running their shortened version of iOS.
Can you also extract data that has been quote unquote deleted from the operating system? And can you just tell us all about that?
Yes, it is sometimes a possibility. It's not always guaranteed, but we sometimes have more advanced tools that can potentially pull that data from the device, and then later, once we get that download, we can put it into that software, and normally will give us indications on whether or not data has been deleted.
And so if a particular photograph or a Word document or some sort of file has been deleted from the operating system, may it still remain on the phone device or computer device?
Yes.
It may still be locatable with your software tools.
That is the hope. Again, not always guaranteed, but again, that's why we're trained to go in there and look for that the data behind the scenes to see if we can recover those artifacts. Yes.
Did you later do another extraction of this phone device back in the office?
Yes.
And tell us if it is different in any way, how your software or hardware was different in doing it at the office.
Yes, in this case, we use, again, a more advanced tool, which is able to capture, the technical term is a full file system. So we're capturing that whole filing cabinet, you would say, of the data stored on the phone, with, again, the probability to not only collect possibly deleted data, but also your systems information, application data, like your social media, messaging apps, everything aside from your normal user data, like your calls and messages and pictures and videos.
And what level of capture, and if you answered it in that, I'm sorry, what level of capture were you able to do?
Again, in this case, I was able to do the full file system back at the office. On scene, the technical term is an advanced logical or logical extraction, again, which encompasses your generic user data on your phone.
And the level of extraction you did at the office, does that encompass data that is outside of the operating system or in unallocated space?
It can include that data, yes.
Now, what kind of information can be generated by this computer software tool that you used to make it presentable for a human such as yourself or the members of the jury to review?
Yeah, in the software, it will place the data in data categories. So it's organized. We can, if we just want to search between messages, we can go in the messages category. If we want to look at logs, like maybe data that your phone's recording, like locations, app activity, that's also presented in its own data category. And it also has the ability to put all that data in chronological order in what they refer to as a timeline. So we can also see all that ongoing data in the timeline section. And if we need to, we can either narrow down to a small scope of time, or if it's requested, we can give all the data all in that timeline to whoever wants to review it.
And for instance, if there's an entry on the timeline that says, April 1st, 2016, photograph ABC was taken. Are there separate folders that are generated by this software tool that has all the images, such as that still photograph, generated?
Yes, when we export it or generate like in a PDF version of that report, all that data is categorized in a PDF, but it also exports a copy of that same data, such as images and videos, in separate subfolders. So if I just wanted to go look at the pictures from the phone directly, I could just go into that subfolder and just look at all thousands of images that might be exported from the phone.
And is there identifying information such as an IMEI that is generated by the software tool? And can you tell us what these things are?
Yes, the IMEI is one identifier that your cell phone has to help authenticate it to your cell phone network. It also is like a serial number unique to your phone. And in this case, our software is able to read and report all those device identifiers from your phone, including an IMEI.
And do you take actual photographs of the cellular phone device, like the exhibit we just put into evidence, to document it before or after you do the extraction?
Yes, just like in crime scene, a cell phone digital evidence is essentially another form of evidence. So we always try to document the current state, condition, whether it's locked, unlocked, and if we, again, in this case, we were provided a passcode. So I normally like to photographically document the phone's identifiers or accounts that may be logged into the phone.
Prior to trial, were you asked to look at two different exhibits to see if they represented a portion of that timeline you described that can be put into the PDF report form, as well as some of the images and videos from this extraction that you performed on the device that's in evidence?
Yes.
May I approach?
May.
What I'm showing you first is O for identification. Did you have an opportunity to review that this morning to make sure that the portion of the PDF and the images in a separate folder there were part of the extraction that you did on this device that we're talking about?
Yes.
And was that accurate?
Yes.
P for identification, is that another carve out of the PDF timeline as well as videos and photographs from that device?
Yes.
All right, this time the state will move O for identification into evidence and reserve on P.
With regard to states O.
No objection.
All right, what was pre-marked as states O will be received into evidence without objection as state 17.
Permission to publish?
You may.
All right, we might actually get something good here.
Opening up the file labeled extraction.
Oh, no, we didn't. We got some spreadsheets. Wah, wah, wah. Ah, see that? Very exciting. Very exciting. Great success.
Guess we don't get that long here. All right, so sorry about your neck. Looking at entry 31079, can we just go column through column and explain what we're looking at?
Yes, the first column normally is just an assigned number, just like a line item number for the report. Because again, this is an excerpt. There could be thousands and thousands of line items when you're looking at the entire timeline. So the far left-hand column is just a line item number, followed by again, the data category for whatever data you're looking at. In this case, there's a couple listed as application usage and then location data.
Let's talk about the column that has dates and times, and can you explain to us what UTC -5 means?
Yes. Another column, again, we're looking this at a timeline, so we want to know dates and times. So we'll include the date and time of the data that was recorded onto the phone. And this report was adjusted for our local Eastern Standard Time here in Orlando, Florida. So UTC -5.
And going up to the top line there, 31075, that indicates that there's a start time for the application com.apple.camera. And then going back to our original one, 31079, that's the end time. Can you tell us what that means?
Yes, so Apple is very good about recording activity on the directly from your device. When you open up a certain application, such as the camera, Apple is making note that you, in this case, it's indicating a start time. So you opened up your camera at 10:21:36 p.m. And then you stopped using it, maybe closed it out or stopped recording at 10:21:38 p.m.
And in this portion of the PDF timeline, there does not appear to have been any videos or photographs captured while the camera was open. Is that accurate?
Based on that excerpt, I don't see a recorded media file.
All right. In the surrounding entries, can we just talk about what I would unfairly probably call spam of locations? What is going on there?
Again, if there's usage, application usage, or you're just in a really good location, or your device is just set to record locations wherever you are, your phone is also recording that data as well. And in some cases, like again, your phone, if you have it set for your camera to record your location when you take a picture, again, like when you reopen that picture, it'll show you, hey, you were located at 2500 West Colonial Drive. That's that data that's being recorded in the background while you're using that application that it might have that permission to record that data.
Can we just go column by column through the first entry here, 16498? What does instant messages mean?
That's referencing text messages.
Second column, outgoing. Does that indicate there's an outgoing communication?
Yes, it'll reflect outgoing or incoming depending on the recipient or sender.
The next column, there's a 1. What does that mean?
That just might be like one entry, one message. I don't see the header for the columns. That one I'm not unsure of.
All right, and the date and time we've already explained. Let's talk about the from, paren owner, and then the participants. What does this all mean?
So the from section, again, if we're looking at the first row of data, it's indicative that it's a text message because the sender, it's listing the phone number being used to send that message. And then for iPhone devices specifically, if you're communicating with another Apple device, it may also list the phone number as well as your backup, which is your Apple ID. So if it can't transmit that message through your phone number, it might default to your iCloud account. And in this case, it's listing both.
All right, and if, for instance, the outgoing recipient or the incoming sender of the text message is in the contacts, would it show up with the person's name, such as Wancho?
Yes, our software will display your contact name as how you save it.
And if there's no contact name, it would just show the phone number?
Phone number or, again, Apple, your iCloud account.
Videos, 16499, capture time, what does that indicate?
So that is when the video, in this case, it looks like a video is captured on the device.
Let's specifically talk about entry 16520. Again, we've discussed that's an instant message and it's incoming rather than outgoing. So that means it came to this phone device?
Yes.
And over to the right of the date and time, which would have been 6:07 p.m. 30 seconds on Christmas 2019, it indicates that it's from a contact named Mo. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Then the contents speak for itself. Going down to 16522, an outgoing instant message at 11:31 p.m. 57 seconds on Christmas 2019. What is the content of that communication?
The content of the message is hide and seek. I shall.
Turning down to 17167. It's an instant message that indicates it's outgoing from this device on January 13th, 2020, 5:01 p.m. 41 seconds. And it's from what is a paren owner. Does that mean it's from the device?
Yes.
What's the content of that text message?
Sorry, what was the line item number?
17167.
And bless you and all of you too. I'll get rid of him.
Then the next three are also outgoing messages. What do they indicate as far as content?
Starting with 17168, then I'll be better, followed by 17169, ugh, and 17170, Torres.
Turning now to entry 31103, which is on page 49 of the 59-page PDF. Again, it looks like what we talked about before, the com.camera application gets opened up to be used at 11:12 p.m. 40 seconds. Is that what this data reflects?
Yes.
And then at entry 31107, a video that ends up being captured as IMG_1062.mov begins at 11:12 p.m. 45 seconds on February 23rd, 2020. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And then there does not seem to be any intervening closing of the camera application before we get to 31113.
In that portion, I don't see that information.
And then at 11:23 p.m. 03 seconds on February 23rd, 2020, in entry 31113, a second movie is generated by this device labeled IMG_1063.mov.
Yes.
I'm going to continue publishing from this exhibit.
For everything you've done to me.
And it's just creepy as
For
hell.
everything you've done to me. Fuck you. Fuck you. Stupid. That's my name. Don't wear it on. I can't fucking breathe, babe. Seriously. Yeah, that's when you do when you choke me. Sarah. Sarah.
Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
That's on you.
Sarah, I can't breathe.
It's on you.
Sarah.
Real ransom. Now you wanna give it for it extra. Cause I got this.
Sarah.
Real ransom.
Sarah. Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
Oh. That's what I feel like when you ching on me.
Sarah.
Fuck you.
I can't breathe, Sarah.
Yeah. You should probably shut the fuck up.
Sarah.
For the record, that was img_1062.mov, now publishing 1063, same respective file name.
Oops, it's death penalty time.
No other questions of this witness?
Any cross-examination?
Good afternoon, Mayor. I believe you stated on direct that you were called to the scene and you were asked to do your analysis out there. Is that correct?
At least a download.
Download. What type of phone was this?
An Apple iPhone XS.
And how were you able to get into the phone, for lack of a better word?
I was provided with the phone's passcode.
Okay. With an Apple phone, without being given that passcode, are you able to get in an Apple phone?
Maybe not necessarily unlock the phone, even though that is an option through some of our advanced tools that is supported. But it can have the ability to download the phone even in a locked state and pull 80–85% of that data.
Is it a much easier process when you have the code?
It's quicker, yes.
And how were you provided that code?
I believe either through Detective Copsel or Connolly at the time, or I may have asked Miss Boone just to reconfirm the passcode.
And did she give you the passcode?
Yeah, somebody did, yes.
Now, on the first exhibit that went up, or when you're talking about the communications or the identifying factors of the phone, one of the things that were identified is dates and times. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. Also, you said it would tell you if the source was incoming or outgoing. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And then you said it would identify, it could identify either by phone number or name. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. On the examples that you gave us, who was the identifying name as to the outgoing on this phone?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Who was the identifying name for the outgoing texts or calls on this phone?
I think in some of the line items that were shown above, it was just listed as a phone number.
Was there ever a name listed?
A physical name, possibly in other line items, but in this, and again, in those excerpts, it's just by phone number.
Okay. Did you ever see the name Brian Boone?
Yes.
Okay. Where did you see the name Brian Boone?
I believe in one of the iCloud or accounts that was logged into the phone, there was an associated email address.
On taking that, was it any other place where you would see in a different name as to the outgoing, other than Brian Boone?
Again, there might have been other names listed in other portions of it. But again, in those excerpts, it was just either by phone number or, again, with the Apple iPhone listing, the iCloud account.
Do you have a copy of the exhibit up there?
No, not on me.
Can we get that pulled up, please? Are you able to see that?
And no, this monitor is not working.
Maybe we approach.
Yes.
It's not going to happen, but I'd like to see her sentenced to die right in that suitcase. People wonder why men gave up on dating.
Yes.
Okay, you're all not like Sarah Boone. I admit it, Maria. Just most of you.
Ma'am, were you able to see that?
Yes.
There's a entry on 12/25/2019. Is that correct?
And are you referencing like the instant message row? Yes. Yes.
All right. Does it, as far as participants, what does that show you? What does it tell you?
So it's listing the owner in reference to we'll say the first phone number, 8684. It's referencing that phone number as well as the Gmail account or iCloud account associated with the phone, and then it's listing a physical name of Brian Boone.
Okay, so it's showing Brian Boone as being the owner of the phone. Is that correct?
For that phone number and or one of the participants in that message conversation.
Did you recall seeing any other name associated with that phone number other than Brian Boone?
I'm not sure I'm understanding the question.
All right, when you did the analysis of this, and you would look for the participants and get that information, match it up with the phone number. Then in certain cases, they will show you the owner name because you said Apple is very detailed in some of their applications. So did you ever see another name associated with this account other than Brian Boone?
There was another iCloud account logged in on the physical phone.
Okay.
There was no name attached.
There was no name attached. Bless you. Now, when you're identifying these sources as being either outgoing or incoming sources, and is that basically telling you what device is being used?
No, it's not indicative of a specific device other than we know outgoing. Obviously the source is the phone that we extracted that data from. In incoming messages, it does not let us know if the message was made through a Samsung Galaxy or another iPhone.
Okay. What identifying information do you get at that time?
In regards to receiving a message?
Yes.
In this case, or what's displayed there, it's going to give us the content of the message. It's going to give us the date and time that the message was sent or received. And again, like in your phone, it does depict either through a small notification arrows indicating ingoing or outgoing. So it's just displaying that version in text up there.
Okay. And then from there, it's basically telling you the number that it came from. Is that correct?
Yes, like in reference to that top row, it's saying that message came from that phone number. Again, the top line item, last 4 digits is 8684. And then it's also listing the message participants.
It's not telling you the person who sent the message, is it?
Correct. Just that it's originating from a phone number.
So if 2 people or more people had access to a phone, you wouldn't, from this information, you wouldn't be able to tell who actually sent the message on any given time. Is that correct?
No, I'm not a fly on the wall and I can't see who's physically typing out messages.
Thank you, ma'am. No further questions.
Any redirect examination?
Other than just your subjective interpretation given the context of conversations.
Yes.
And if photographs or videos are taken during these conversations, that could be indicative of who is behind the phone device as well.
Based on sound and visuals, it does help.
Thank you.
Can this witness be released?
As far as the state is concerned, yes, sir.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, ma'am, you're released. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
State any other witnesses or evidence to call at this time?
Not for the morning presentation.
Okay, all right. Members of our jury, it is 12:21. At this point in time, we're going to go ahead and take our lunch break. I'm going to ask you to report back here at 2 o'clock at 12A, the Orange County Courthouse. I'm going to give you a similar instruction as same instruction I read to you last week. Jurors, you must not conduct any investigation on your own. This includes reading newspapers, watching television, or using a computer, cell phone, the internet, any electronic device, or any other means at all to get information related to this case or the people and places involved in this case. This applies whether you are in the courthouse, at home, or anywhere else. You must not visit places mentioned in the trial or use the internet to look at maps or pictures to see any place discussed during the trial. Jurors do not watch local news or read local newspapers. Jurors must not have discussions of any sort with friends, family members, or even your fellow jurors about the case or the people and places involved. So do not let anyone make comments to you or ask questions about the trial. I want to stress again that just as you must not talk about this case face-to-face, you must not talk about this case by using an electronic device. You must not use phones, computers, or other electronic devices to communicate. Do not send or accept any messages related to this case or your jury service. Do not discuss this case or ask for advice by any means at all, including posting information on an internet website, chat room, or blog. With that, members of the jury, we'll be in recess. We'll see you back here at 2 o'clock this afternoon. I thank you for your time.
Oops. All right. Well, there we have it. We had to struggle through all the expert testimony.
State, anything we need to address before we adjourn for the lunch hour?
No, sir. Your Honor, just briefly, as far as the scheduling of events this afternoon, the next witness we would be intending on calling would be Detective Copsel. Capsule, I apologize. Just the publication of the interviews in this case would be approximately 3 hours in length, not to mention any direct testimony and cross-examination testimony. So that's likely to take us beyond the 5 o'clock hour. I don't know if we can work late to accomplish it all.
I'm inclined to work late. It's just if they're on board with that.
Okay.
If we need to go after 5 o'clock due to that presentation, we can. How long do you anticipate
This judge is excellent.
going? If you had to ballpark it.
He doesn't inject himself.
I would think 4 to 5 hours, depending on the length of the cross.
What about in your side of the ledger?
I think my direct exam questions will probably be 30 to 40 minutes.
Okay. How long do you anticipate your cross-examination being, Counselor? Mr. Henderson?
Judge, not too long, 30, 35 minutes.
Okay.
If that, but here's the only concern that I have.
Yes, sir.
We have one juror who has said and told us during voir dire, as long as we're getting out of here at 5, my scheduling is okay. After that, that causes a problem. That's the only concern I have.
Okay.
So if we could let them know early, if that's the plan, so she might be able to make some arrangements. And probably need to do that.
Judge, and the other component, we've got some people flying in and we've got experts that we're trying to coordinate. So the sooner we know the logistics of when they're going to rest the case, we talked late last week that we felt like they were going to end their case at the end of business today. But it sounds like it may get pushed to tomorrow.
I think step one is conferring with our jury if they're amenable to working past 5. I do recall the one juror with child care concerns. If we go slightly over, and we'll have to address that when we get closer to it, and maybe a situation where cross-examination may have to be left for tomorrow, but that's something that we'll need to discuss when we get closer to it.
Yes.
Anything else, State? Anything else, Defense? All right, we'll see you all at 2 o'clock. Wait, yes, sir.
The state has been using CDs, I believe. We've got flash drives to admit into evidence instead of CDs. We didn't bring the capability to transfer those to CDs.
Response?
Is that a declaration or is there?
mean, it sounds like that's what Mr. Owens's intent is for the purposes of submitting evidence.
One reason I would suggest not introducing USBs is because they're rewritable and they can be manipulated and destroyed by the jury, or not that anybody would do it intentionally, clerks of the court. Any sort of issues can happen when something is not locked and put onto a physical burnt piece of wax.
Mr. Owens?
We'll see what we can do here locally. There's a FedEx. I don't know if they would be able to do that. The FedEx is a block away. We'll check with them at lunch.
I would check with them. I agree with the state's concerns as to manipulation or editing of anything that may be contained in a USB drive. Not to say that that's going to happen, but it certainly preserves the evidence moving forward rather than it being in a editable form, be it in a USB drive.
We'll go talk.
All right, very good. Okay, thank you all very much. We'll see you at 2 o'clock. Court's off the record.
All right. So we had the boring expert testimony, and then we had the main video, and that was just horrific. I've seen it before, but that was horrific. I don't see how there's any possibility of anything other than a guilty. I really don't. When you videotape yourself killing another human being while they beg to be let out of a suitcase, which is in the same room as you, and you can easily just walk over and unzip it, you're a freaking monster. You're a monster. You're a defective unit that needs to be taken out of service. I'm offended that she's breathing the same oxygen as me. All right, I'll set this back up and see you guys in about an hour.